With Mr. Mazur for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Professor Damodaran, my questions will be for you today. Are Canadian depositors at risk if the government mandates ESG ratings or climate-related disclosure statements on financial institutions?
It goes back to the heart of what I said, which is sacrifice is at the heart of being good. If you're going to ask banks to do something, you got to ask who's paying for it. Bankers are. It's not coming from bankers' personal wealth. The market cap of the 5 biggest Canadian banks collectively will be a drop in the ocean of the cost of meeting climate change. So if you ask banks to bear this cost, and what I hear when I hear that is you got to lend to green energy companies at below market rates. Because if it's at market rates, you don't need any of this stuff. If you're going to ask banks to do it, guess who's going to bear the cost? It's going to be depositors. Is that really what you want of this process? Acting like banks are these are like the big tech companies with hundreds of billions of dollars to throw around is delusional. So ultimately, if you put strictures on banks, the people who will pay this, and I can almost guarantee you this outcome, will not be bank shareholders, will not be bank managers, it'll be bank depositors.
Thank you.
I thought your role was to protect them.
Thank you. Sort of goes into my next question. What would be the impact to retirement savings if government forced climate-related disclosures on Canadian pension funds in an attempt to meet the Paris climate targets?
I'll be quite honest. I think I call this disclosure diarrhea. It's happening across the board. Companies, pension funds. You know what the net effect of all of this disclosure is? We get immune to it. We'll have 150 pages. And in fact, if you want truly ineffective legislation, pass more disclosure legislation. It'll actually make people even more immune to debate about climate change because you're going to throw the big stuff and the small stuff into that disclosure. And if in fact, pension funds are required to bear a cost, there again, you got to ask, is this the right group to be bearing that cost?
Will government regulation of ESG scores and climate change disclosure statements on financial institutions have any impact in reducing emissions?
Well, even the ESG services have no idea what ESG measures. ESG is the most diffuse, undefined. It's like nailing Jell-O to a wall. If ESG services have no idea what they're measuring, how the heck are governments going to require companies to follow ESG rules? It's a recipe for disaster again.
So would there be basically no way to reduce or to measure the way how many emissions are being even reduced?
Well, they can disclose whatever they want, but if you look at the net effect, it doesn't seem to match up. In fact, if you collect up what companies claim they've done, and then you look at the output and say, why isn't it showing up in the results? There's many a slip in the cup and the lip. Disclosing this doesn't seem to show up in the final numbers. And I think that's the question we've got to ask is why, after 20 years of forcing companies to disclose this, and more so in the last few years, is nothing changing on the ground?
Thank you. You referred to an ESG gravy train in one of your presentations. Can you explain this term and explain how banks and consultants benefit the most from ESG scores and climate-related disclosures?
BlackRock was very much up in fronter in this ESG train early on. In fact, Larry Fink said the world will not be safe if we don't have ESG. So I took BlackRock's Sustainability Fund, which is a fund built around ESG, and I compared it to their regular fund. Out of the 500 stocks of the regular fund, 497 showed up in the Sustainability Fund. The difference was BlackRock charged 5 times more for the Sustainability Fund than the regular fund. You look at fund managers, you look at bankers, you look at consultants, every one of them has an ESG arm, and the ESG arm makes money by selling this notion to people. And again, with the idea that you can be good and be more valuable at the same time.
Thank you. Does improving ESG ratings or climate-related disclosures increase value or decrease risk in any proven way?
None that I can see of. I've heard, as I said, I've looked at every single research paper in this space. The papers that do are advocacy papers masquerading as research papers. I mean, I live in the value space. That's what I do. I value companies. I'm still to value a company where ESG has made the company more valuable. It can make it less valuable, But when ESG makes a company more valuable, it's because it's PR, it's marketing, at which point you're gaming the system. You're encouraging what you call greenwashing by pushing that idea on companies.
Thank you. You stated in the Financial Times, and I quote, "It serves ESG advocates to keep the definition amorphous since, like the socialists of the 20th centuries, whose response to every socialist failure was that their ideas had never been properly implemented, the defense against every ESG critic is that it is incorrectly defined or implemented," end quote. What did you mean by this?
You have 30 seconds, Professor.
I've had a lot of blowback on that one. The truth is that because ESG measures, you put 100 ESG people in a room, they come up with 100 different definitions. So whatever your critique is, they say, that's not my ESG you're critiquing. Very convenient, but not very, it's not very honest.
Thank you. We'll